Hi, welcome to an Idle Hands game review. I'm Lyle.
I'm Jeremy, and today we're going to talk about Star Trek Adventures, the new release from Modiphius using their 2D20 system.
A system that's shared with Mutant Chronicles and Conan.
Adventures in an Age Undreamed.
Age Undreamed, yeah. It just rolls off the tongue.
Right.
Well, Star Trek Adventures actually rolls off the tongue now.
Yes.
And we should say that this review is a read-through review in that we've read through the book, or the PDF, actually. We haven't actually played the game. And we bought the PDF. It wasn't provided. Hint, 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 Modiphius. So you're going to get an honest opinion. If Modiphius starts providing us with PDFs, then we'll be less honest.
And you should also know that neither Lyle or I are Star Trek superfans. So there's going to be a lot of mistakes, maybe character names, places, technology. But this game definitely gave us an appreciation for that IP, and yeah, we enjoyed what we read.
Yeah, and the book is over 300 pages. It's a lot to get through. In this video, we're going to provide a brief overview of the game for a more detailed walkthrough, and you can hear me say or call Worf Warg. Check the link below, and you can listen to over an hour, I would say, of our podcast. Now, before we get into the review, there's probably some questions you want answered straight away, so we'll get to them right now. Question number one: who are you playing? Right. Starfleet.
Yes. Yeah, you're a cadet, or your character generation is based on being a cadet in Starfleet Academy.
Right. So you start off as an officer in the Starfleet. And so it's very focused, which on the one hand limits you in that you can't play Klingons. I'm sure there's going to be a book. Or Borg. Why? I'm sure there's going to be a book, though.
Right.
But on the other hand, it allows them to really focus on Starfleet, both in character creation and the fluff. So I guess makes it richer or better. Question number two: when are you playing? Right.
So what they talk about is the main setting is Next Generation. And so everything you've seen in TV shows has already happened, and that's the main setting. But they do offer alternative rules or kind of indications of what technology or what alien races would be missing from earlier eras.
So the book is written as if it's Next Generation, but you can actually play in three eras. Next Generation, of course, the original series, and Enterprise. By that we mean the Scott Bakula series?
Yes, right.
Yeah. Third question: do they include starships? Yes, they do. And if you listen later on in the review, you'll find out whether or not they handle starships in a good or bad way.
Right.
Yeah.
So the book itself starts out with about 70 pages of fluff, and then it's followed by what they call operations, or the game mechanics.
Right. Yeah. So the fluff starts off with an overview, and it's more of a diplomatic history or a diplomatic overview of the current situation for Starfleet. So, for example, when they present the Cardassians, they're not presenting them as here are the Cardassians, a lot of detail on them, just like here are the Cardassians and their relationship to Starfleet,
right,
and what the current status is. It's written as if you are a Starfleet officer, and you're getting a debriefing or a briefing on Starfleet.
Yes, it gives you the appropriate kind of academic tone of actually being in Starfleet and the information you would be privy to.
Yeah, as somebody who's not a huge fan, there were some races, or the Andromeda Syndicate. Am I remembering that correctly? Where I didn't know who they were, so this doesn't provide enough detail that if you didn't know what they are to begin with, that you could actually understand what they are.
Right.
But if you're a fan, which I'm sure most people buying Star Trek Adventures are, I think it's enough information. Yeah. But then, on the other hand, they don't need that information.
Right. They already know.
So then it moves into the history of Starfleet. And here they made we'll say a bold. They've gone boldly where no one has gone before. They've decided to present it entirely through excerpts. And by that we mean, and we can see an example here, where you would have like a couple paragraphs of somebody writing a memo or a Starfleet log. Right. Starship log.
Yeah, right.
Starship log. They write a Starship log.
Captain's log.
Yeah, Captain's log. Yeah.
Right.
I found it a bit disjointed, but I'm sure there were certain things I did pick up, like, oh, I recognize that name, and they are talking about this particular event in the TV shows. So I think somebody who knew a lot about the TV shows, they would probably enjoy that a bit more.
Yeah,
and they might not need the connection that maybe somebody like me needed.
Right. Yeah. So I think they probably constructed that to fill in holes or gaps where even superfans might not know how things connected or what occurred during these historic events, and we completely missed all of that.
Right. So that seemed like a lot of pages with excerpts, and I think. I mean, I knew we were going to review this book, and I thought, oh, I don't think I can read the rest of the book. This is going to be a real chore. But I powered on for the review.
Nice.
And we moved into like the current situation with Starfleet. So there's kind of the overview, the history, and now the recent history.
Right.
And then that switches to a combination of excerpts and a report. So it was a little bit easier to get through. Yeah.
And what they did really well, I think, in this opening part is the explanation of the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
So they kind of spell out exactly what it is and why it was established by the Federation and used by Starfleet. And then what made it even more interesting is they presented memos or discussions that were counterpoint. People that were not really enthusiastic, that saw danger or disliked the approach that Starfleet was taking using the Prime Directive.
So yeah, the main text is presenting what the Prime Directive is, and these excerpts are showing how the Prime Directive, how it survives in contact with reality. And I thought that was an effective use or effective combination of the two styles.
Yes.
Whereas the history, I thought they shouldn't have committed to that excerpt style entirely. Here, I thought they showed why excerpts can actually be a really fun way to show different ideas in the book. So that's 70 pages.
Right.
And that was a lot. And I came to one conclusion after reading this, or actually maybe two conclusions. One, I didn't know all that much about Star Trek to begin with. Number two is when you have a book that is based on an IP like Star Trek, I don't think the fluff in the book really matters because people can get it from the original source, the TV shows, the books.
And the internet. Yeah.
I've heard of that. Yeah, like a Star Trek wiki and that.
Right.
So what a book like this really needs to do is it really needs to show you how you can play in the world. And that's where the rest of the book is all about, the operations and the character creation and the technology in that.
Right. So speaking of operations, that's the very next section. And operations are basically your game mechanics.
Yeah.
So they explain the 2D20 system and kind of the refinements that they made to make it match very well the Star Trek IP. So for people that don't know the 2D20 system, it's something that Modiphius has used in previous games, and what you're doing in any of your, what they call in Star Trek tasks or skill checks, is rolling two 20-sided die.
At least two.
At least, right?
Yeah.
So starting with a minimum, a minimum of 20-sided die, a maximum of 5.
Yeah, I guess the 2 to 5 D20 system
that doesn't
was a nice catch.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
2D20's got a nice sound to it. And so what you're doing is rolling for successes. So you have a target number that's generated by an attribute and a discipline. This gives you a number that you're rolling under, and any roll under generates a success. Okay, so the difficulty of a task will usually be 1. That's the normal difficulty, and that means you need at least 1 success on your roll, but the range of difficulty can go from 0 all the way up to 5. So how would you generate multiple successes rolling 2 D20s?
I don't know how.
The first way would be to roll a critical success. A critical success is a 1 on a 20-sided die, so you're well under everything, and that will generate 2 successes. So rolling 2 1s actually would give you 4 successes. But beyond that, they use the disciplines to kind of specialize a role and give you a focus.
Yeah, and the discipline is another word for skill.
Right. So these are your specialized skills. So say if it's a science skill you're rolling with, your specialization is botany because you're dealing with plants. Yeah. And that will give you...
They call the specialization focus.
Focus, right.
Yeah.
And so focus is a number that if you roll under that number, not only 1 as a critical success, but anything under your focus will give you 2 successes for that roll.
Yeah. So for example, if your science rating is 3, and then you can roll 3, 2, or 1, that will give you 2 successes, as opposed to the normal rolling a 1, giving you 2 successes. And there's other ways in which we can get more successes or get more dice for the dice pool, such as using momentum, which is actually generated by successes. If you score more successes than you need, so let's say you only needed 1 success, but you scored 3 successes because you got really lucky, then you can get these momentum dice. or momentum points.
Points,
Yeah.
and those points are shared by the whole group. So
Yeah.
during that same scene, anyone can use those points to power certain abilities or gain additional dice.
Yeah. There's also a thing called determination. And determination is linked to another game term called value. So what value would be, and I don't know verbatim, but for example, Spock says reason is not the be-all and end-all of wisdom. No, logic is not the be-all and end-all of wisdom. It's actually in Star Trek Adventures. You can read that, but it's very Spock-esque.
Right.
I think Worf has something very Klingon, like I'm an honorable Klingon, and that's his value or something. And a determination is a way to activate your values. So if there's a situation that comes up that's about logic, or for example, Spock having to go away from logic to do the right thing, then you can say, I'm going to activate my value, and that will allow you to tap into this pool of points called determination. You have 1 to 3 of these points. People who play Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, it's similar to inspiration. It's like these extra points you can use to do cool stuff in the game, like add a die to your pool, for example.
Right, and the main difference between buying a die with momentum and with determination is momentum just gives you a die that you have to roll, and determination can give you an auto success. So that's
one of the powers.
Yeah, one of the abilities, and
Yeah.
that's a big difference between previous versions of the 2d20 system, where when you bought a die, you would always be buying auto successes.
Yeah. And another part of the rules is a thing called traits, and these are things that are attached to the world around you. They can provide either advantages or disadvantages. Examples are there's situation traits. Darkness would be an example of that. There are environment traits, which would be like your the tech level of the place. There's personal traits such as species, and equipment traits like what does something do. Star Trek Adventures provides a good example of it or a few good examples of how traits manifest in the game. They use one from Deep Space Nine,
Right.
where O'Brien and Sisko go onto the spaceship, or the space station, sorry. We did preface we weren't super fans. They go onto the space station, and the space station has 2 traits attached to it. One is abandoned Cardassian space station, and the other is power is offline.
Right.
Both of those will provide disadvantages. And one of the first tasks O'Brien has is to remove that trait of power offline, and I guess provide the trait of power online. Yeah.
Right. Right, and so this is something that the GM will kind of prepare the characters with. They will let them know what traits the situation they're going into has, give the characters ability to take equipment that might help to counteract those disadvantages or give them advantages.
Yeah.
And also there are certain traits that you will just have based on your character creation. And another big feature to the 2d20 system are the challenge dice. These are d6s that have special symbols on them. So rolling a 1 or a 2 indicates 1 or 2 damage, 3 or 4 have no effect, and 5 and 6 have the Star Trek emblem, the Starfleet emblem, that indicate a special effect. Very often you will see in a weapons description or equipment description that you'll be rolling 2 challenge dice indicated by that symbol, the Starfleet insignia.
Yeah, it'd be a 2 Starfleet insignia.
Right, instead of just saying D6. And those are the special dice with special effects. If you don't have those specially marked dice, you can actually just use a regular D6 and consult the table for what effect happens.
Yeah, I mean, when you roll a 5 and a 6, you just imagine that came up with the starship insignia.
Right.
And you just ignore the 3 and the 4 that you roll. Yeah. We've mentioned attributes and disciplines, but what are they?
So attributes in Star Trek Adventures are basically your character's stats. So they consist of control, daring, fitness, insight, presence, and reason.
And you can imagine which one Kirk would be good in and which ones Spock would be good in.
Right. And those give you the basis for when you're doing a task roll, when you're using the 2d20s, that's your first kind of base number that you're starting with. In addition to attributes, you also have disciplines, which are essentially skills. They're your specialization or the training that your character has. So the combination of an attribute and a discipline gives you that target number, so when you're rolling for certain tasks, that's how you generate that number. And combining them, you can kind of see how you'd use your reason and your science, or you'd use your security and your fitness in combination to complete different tasks. And basically it's up to the GM to kind of determine what type of task this is and how you would generate it.
And in the book, it actually gives you a lot of examples on how the attributes and the disciplines would combine. So for every discipline, it will say, this is how it would work with every attribute. And next up in the Star Trek Adventures book is character creation, which they call reporting for duty. Now, all your attributes start at 7 and all your disciplines start at 1, and you add to that by going through a life path, which is a feature of all the 2D20 systems.
Right, but this one is a little
2D20
more...
games.
Yeah, right, and this is a little more economic than some of the previous versions we've seen.
Yeah, I mean, there's 7 steps here. There was 9 in Conan, and I have no idea. I can't remember.
Right, but unlike those previous systems, there is no point-buy system. There's not a lot of variation. Most of these steps have 6 options, so if you want to randomly generate them, you roll a 6-sided die, or you can actually choose if you want to craft a specific type of character.
So step number 1 is your species. And you get a choice of 7.
Right, and so some people have complained a little bit. There's no Borg in there. There's no half Klingon in there. But so they give you a nice selection.
You get Betazoid.
Right, Betazoid.
Andoran.
Andoran. Trill.
Yes. Trill. Yeah.
Tellarite.
Yeah.
Bajoran.
Yeah. Human. Did somebody say human?
Human.
Vulcan.
And Vulcan, right.
Is that 7?
Almost. Danublian. Betazoid. We said that.
Yeah, we said them now.
No, we have said them all.
No.
So that's a selection, and I guess they're basing it on, who would actually be able to attend Starfleet Academy, what, races the Federation was friendly with or had good relations.
At this step, you also get a talent, which is just a special ability, and you also get your species trait, as we mentioned earlier, in addition to bonuses to your attributes. Now, just because of time, we're not going to walk through what each step provides you, but you can certainly find out when you listen to the podcast.
Right. And so basically they're just going to modify your disciplines, your attributes, or give you focus.
Yeah, things like that. Well, except for step 2, which gives you your value, or your first opportunity to get a value. And step 2 is your environment. Examples would be like your home world is where you grew up in a busy colony or another species home world.
Right.
Step 3 is your upbringing. Interesting thing about this step is you can choose to accept your upbringing or rebel against it.
Right.
Yeah. Examples would be you grew up in an agricultural family or a Starfleet family. So you imagine, hey, what did Kirk do? Based on the J.J. Abrams, I guess he rebelled against his family.
Right, and listen to the Beastie Boys.
Did he? Yes.
Yeah.
Sabotage, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So that was step 3. Step 4 is Starfleet. The Starfleet career career path, whether or not it's command, operations, or sciences.
Yeah, so your academic track and kind of where you're specializing.
Yeah. Right. Step 5, I'm already losing count.
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
Step 5 is your career events, and you can choose 2 of them. And you could conceivably destroy a starship twice.
Right. Yeah, so this is the only option in your life path where there's more than 6 options. So you roll a d20 for this because there is so many things that can happen.
I believe there's 20.
Yes.
Yeah. And even though you can have something like discover something versus destroying a starship, you're always getting advantages or good things out of it. So I guess, sure, you lost a starship, but hey, it was a learning experience. Right. Try not to lose another one. Oh, you lost another one. All right, try not to lose a third. We'll make you captain. And then we get into step 6, which is your experience. And you have a choice to be a new officer, an experienced officer, or a veteran officer. Now, you do get like advantages and disadvantages depending on what you do. I think the experienced officer is kind of, the happy medium between the two. And then finally, step 7 is finishing touches, and you just plug in. You get some things that you can plug into your character to customize them.
Right.
And I found this life path much easier to do than the previous 2 games, Mutant Chronicles and Conan. I found it much more streamlined, and each step seemed to have a clear role. I mean, this is what I am, this is where I grew up, this is my family, this is Starfleet,
Right.
Whereas something like Conan, I didn't get that as much. It was like they didn't seem distinct enough. And here, I thought it was a lot of fun to go through.
Yeah, I think so. And then the focus on your academic career, your Starfleet career, made it very refined, and so you had a real clear idea of what you were doing.
So that's creating your character. What about experience, Jeremy?
So there isn't XP in Star Trek Adventures, and they handle this in a much more storytelling kind of episodic way. They have what you call character milestones. And this is something that's determined by the GM, whether it's awarded or not, and there's actually even a spotlight milestone that's voted on by the party. Instead of giving you a value and saying, now I'm level 3, this gives you something you've accomplished and a milestone that you've hit that you're moving on from, so it shows true character development.
Mm-hmm. And you also get reputation. I think you start with 10,
right,
but of course that can go up or down depending on what you do.
Right.
Which, again, felt very Star Trek to me.
Yes, and I think in a campaign, this will have a nice effect as it will open up certain options or limit you to certain things you're not allowed to do because people just don't like you or don't trust you.
Or you can have a good reputation and you get promoted.
Yes, right.
Or maybe a bad reputation, but you're still so good, I guess. Like Kirk, I guess.
Right.
Oh, he goes up and down. Yeah.
Or Michael.
Michael Burnham, yeah. And at this stage, you might be thinking, what about the starships? Well, just wait, we're getting there. Because then I get into the environment, like the environments of the planet. They all seem to be deadly. They also get into the stellar phenomena, like nebulas and black holes and that. And they rank them from 1 to 5 in order of severity.
Right.
And that can determine how many successes you need to achieve things. I thought that was really well done. I mean, it's a pretty brief section, but I thought kind of captured what it would be like, floating through space. And you don't see that all that often in science fiction games.
Yeah, that's true. And it also simulates the TV show or the films well because they're always having trouble with communications or the transporter. There's always something interfering.
Yeah. And they give a good example later in the book when they talk about starship combat. Ooh, teaser. Where, if you have a ship of the line versus a shuttle. I mean, there's no way a shuttle is going to be able to do anything against that ship of the line. But maybe it can go into a nebula cloud, and that's going to cause havoc with the ship of the line. Yeah, and probably the shuttle too. I probably should be that example a little bit better. Yeah, and then they get into the scientific method, which I was really surprised to see.
Right. Yeah, and I think this is something that Star Trek fans were kind of expecting because there is always a lot of deduction and kind of adhering to real science in the Star Trek series and books.
A lot of
and
problem
films.
solving.
Right. And so this gives you mechanics for problem solving. So the scientific method, of course, is using 2D20, and it follows what you've always known as the scientific method. So first the players are gathering information.
So they observe.
Yes, they're observing the situation together.
And here they can only use, I think, 3 disciplines, such as medicine, science.
Yeah, you're not going to use security to interrogate a planet.
To observe it. Observe that planet.
Right. So you're observing and collecting information. And then what you're doing in the second step is forming a hypothesis. And so this is kind of a group discussion about how we would solve this problem. And, depending on the number in your party, maybe you're coming up with 4 or 5 hypotheses that may or may not work. The GM is, of course, overhearing this and tells you whether you're on the right track or not. So if there's nothing that's actually going to work scientifically, he will send you back to the drawing board.
Work to solve the problem.
Yes.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a scientific.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're overcoming the problem, the difficulty, and then of course the third step is testing. So trying out that hypothesis and seeing what works.
Yeah. So like in the second step, hypothesis, maybe you have 5 ideas. The game master is just going to say you're on the right track if one of them could be a possible solution, but the game master doesn't say that's the right idea.
Right.
And that's where the testing comes in.
Yeah. So in testing, you're trying all of those ideas to see what actually worked.
And I think at this point of reading the book, I was like, wow, they really captured Star Trek.
Right.
For this non-fan to say.
You're right.
Yeah.
But where are the starships?
I did flip. And to reinforce that even more, when they present conflict, which is next, social conflict is first.
Right.
And then combat is next.
Right. And a nice Star Trek touch to combat is if you go into a situation using lethal force, you're going to generate threat. And so that's another mechanic used in the game by the GM specifically to introduce complications. He can use this to force scenes to end, to kind of move things along. So it's a pool that's generated of these tokens or points that the party can see, the group can see, so you know how much power or how complicated or difficult the GM can make your situation.
Then it gets into the technology, including weapons and equipment. And as you know, Star Trek's not really about weapons, so it's not an extensive list. One thing that we should point out is that the weapons use, of course, the special challenge dice or the damage dice. Also, resistance dice comes into combat because you roll for damage, but also to resist things. You roll that same challenge die.
Right.
And also the weapons have keywords attached to them. An example would be vicious, which does more damage. Accurate, which makes it easier to hit, especially if you use like a minor action called aim.
Right.
So kind of linking things together. And carrying capacity. I mean, you can carry 2 additional items beyond your standard equipment.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess pockets weren't invented yet. So hasn't made a comeback yet. And finally, we get into starships.
The moment we've all been waiting for. Sorry.
And starships are treated very much like characters, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I mean, what's Star Trek without the Enterprise? What's the Enterprise without the Enterprise?
You're right.
guess they would have to call it something else. Scott Bakula's character. But I don't know his name.
Archer. Something.
Is it?
Something Archer.
Okay. Oh, they reference that in Star Trek Adventures.
Oh,
is that who
yes,
he is?
that's
all
who
right.
he is, yes.
Oh, that makes sense. And all right, that was lost on me. So they're treated very much like characters, in that they have systems, wherein their systems would be communication, computers, engines, sensors, structures, and weapons. And then they have their departments, and they are command, comm, engineering, security, science, and medicine. So the exact same as the disciplines.
Yeah, the characters' disciplines, right.
Now, the systems, I mean, that's kind of what the starship is. And then the departments are bonuses that can help the characters who are controlling the starship. And starships also have focus, or foci. But they have focus for everything. And the rationale is that you have so many different people on the starship that they're going to be specialized in everything or every situation that's going to come up. Yeah. And they present all the ships of the line. I'm guessing they present a lot of them, and they present them in alphabetical order, which I guess makes a lot of sense.
Right.
Although I was a little bit surprised to see the Defiant, because you normally expect the weaker ships, and you build up to the better ships. So I was surprised to see the Defiance presented so early, because I thought, I thought that was a really badass ship. But no, it's alphabetical, which makes sense because the Excelsior is like more of a scientific vessel, whereas the Defiant is more of a warship. Which is better? I don't know. So you can certainly see people debating that. So they present it that way, and you have your Akira, you have your Defiant, you have your Excelsior. Just name dropping. I'm gonna say Orion. Was there an Orion in there?
They also present them in the schematic kind of line art that we're always used to seeing representations of the ships, especially on the consoles, shown. So it's
also
nice,
in action. I think every ship gets its own picture.
Yes.
Yeah,
right.
in action. So it's really nice. They also talk about people who are familiar with BattleTech and how they present all the mechs. They talk about how it came to be, like why did they make this particular design, and they do that in Starfleet Adventures. And even for somebody like myself who's less familiar or maybe less interested in that background, I did like reading that. It's like, oh, okay, so
that's why there's a science ship. Yeah, that's why this is a combat ship. Yeah.
So that comes up. And then they also provide the alien vessels.
Right, so you have your Klingon birds of prey, and you have your Borg cubes, you have everything that you've basically seen, so maybe not as specialized as what they represent with Starfleet, but ships that you've seen, large and small, that are opposing you.
Yeah, you get a few for each one. I don't know if you get a few cubes. I don't know if there are a few Borg cubes. One thing they don't do is they don't get into the background, because you imagine, like, the Starfleet doesn't know why this particular bird of prey came into service, so they don't provide that information. But it certainly satisfied me.
Right.
Is the selection. And then they get into starship combat, and it's very much about, of course, the people and how the actions that they can take on the ship. Of course, you have rules for shields, breaching, and structural damage. Yeah. And then we get into the game mastering section, which covers things such as how to create scenes, how to end scenes effectively, also how to create NPCs, which, when you think about it, with Star Trek, people might have a lot of expectations on the different types of alien species they're going to encounter, especially when you have a species of the week, and what quirks does it have. So it has a little table that you can roll. I think one is where they kiss or smell people's wrists. So I wouldn't have thought to do that. So I thought the table was pretty helpful.
Yes.
Also, how to create different worlds, and of course you can roll on the table just to see what it is. And I thought the tables were really helpful in that certainly you can get a block, but also it might be fun for the game master to just roll on these tables and go, okay, now I got to deal with this.
Yes.
You know, so that's going to be fun for me. You know, because maybe, you know, when you make worlds, you kind of create the same thing all the time, just different variations. And here you're like, okay, now it's a gaseous planet, and what do I do with that? Yeah. And then that moves into aliens and adversaries.
Right. Yeah, so this presents basically all the alien races that you've seen from the show and that you've interacted with, and most of them, you know, adversarial, and people are going to be probably encountering as enemies.
And finally, the book ends with an adventure, and we're not going to talk about that because we don't want to spoil it for you. Also, we didn't read it because we don't want to spoil it for each other, and we hadn't decided who was going to be the game master.
Right.
But it was nice to see that they had that. Yeah. So, Jeremy, what did you think of Star Trek Adventures?
I really liked it. I was really surprised because the IP itself I wasn't interested in. And so when it was released in the summer, that's interesting. They're trying Star Trek again. But reading through the rules and really seeing what they did with the 2D20 system, how they refined it, and how well this system enforced the genre. Like, this really felt like Star Trek, and it kept you focused and really playing a Star Trek experience.
Yeah. I'm going to say this is the best 2D20 game out there right now. It's not my favorite because I like the Mutant Chronicles world better, but this is a better rule system. And like Jeremy, I wasn't a fan, and it was actually Jeremy's idea to review this, and I thought, who wants to read Star Trek? But we did, and I actually came away after reading through this book with a better appreciation of Star Trek. And I even started watching Deep Space Nine. Like, I powered through that pilot, and that is terrible. That's a terrible pilot. Anyway. But I'm working through it. I'm also watching Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, right, Discovery.
And we have a review of the first 5 episodes coming.
Yes, yeah, a nice long discussion of kind of how they developed that show.
Yeah. So I think this book succeeds on many levels. One thing, it gave me a really good idea of how I can play in the world. Another thing, it really sold me on the setting. And finally, it's a very, very nice system. Yes. So a really nice rule set. So I really like that. And Jeremy, you were saying that kind of the Star Trek style of game, we don't really have another game out there that does that.
Yeah, I think that's true. This is really like so different from, you know, Starfinder or even Traveler or other sci-fi games that you may be familiar with.
Yeah.
This gives you a really pure Star Trek experience, and I think this is something that fans have been looking for.
Yeah, I mean, you're not kind of a party of adventurers that happen to be in a starship. You are part of Starfleet. You are doctors. You are whatever Deanna of Troy was, counselors.
Crybaby? Something.
Counselor. I think the technical word was counselor. Okay. You are the precocious Wesley Crusher.
Right.
You are the promiscuous Captain Kirk. I mean, you got a lot of different people with a justification to be together, and that diversity means that you're going to encounter a diverse number of different problems. And I think this game handles it really well.
Yeah. And kind of bringing problem solving and negotiation to the forefront instead of combat and, you know, starship battle, I think is a really good choice.
Yeah. So I mean, I do have the PDF now. I came away thinking I now need to get the print book.
Yeah, me as well. Yeah, I
definitely
really
sold me on that.
Yeah, I think this will motivate you to get deeper into Star Trek and also to want to play in that world.
Well, if you're coming away from this video thinking you have enough information to make a decision whether or not you want to buy or not buy Star Trek Adventures, great. If you want a more detailed walkthrough, like I said before, please check the link below. And there's our podcast where we go into the rules, for example, in a lot more detail.
Right.
And if you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe, and especially just to get the word out on Star Trek Adventures.
Yes, and we also have a discussion, like we mentioned, on Discovery, which will be an extensive video, so please look for that on this channel.
Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.